best of firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road Growth listeners. Today I have Nick Collins. He is a CEO of Satorus Digital. And if you're watching us live on video, you'll notice his picture perfect, clear video right there. It's probably the clearest video possible. But when you're talking to a digital marketer, you would hope that he's going to have a clear picture and a very kept digital persona. Thank you, Nick, for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So yeah, a digital marketer. I mean, how would you describe yourself? I'm getting more and more digital marketers out there. How would you describe yourself compared to other digital marketers out there?
So I would say a lot of digital marketers out there focus on, they do a lot of the same things, right? So it's a very cookie cutter. We're going to set up a Facebook ad for you. We're going to set up a Google ad or whatever. It's almost rote for a lot of them, where they do the exact same thing, exact same kind of target market audiences and things of that nature. Whereas we are more of a full service, custom tailored marketing agency that just happens to be focused on digital, right? So instead of being digital marketers, we're marketers that focus on digital technologies. So I think that's probably the biggest differentiator. Everything we do is custom tailored specifically to our customers' needs, as opposed to just selling them Facebook ads or whatever kind of favorite marketing platform that marketing agency happens to have.
Fair enough. Have you always had a background in technology and web design? Was a young Nick into computers?
Very much so. I grew up in the household of a network architect. So we had computers in our house, and let me put it this way. I'm a child of the 80s. I had my own computer in my bedroom when I was like in second or third grade, right?
Wow.
So we're talking like 86, 87. And I had my own computer because I got my dad's hand-me-downs, right? So whenever he had to upgrade for work, then I got his hand-me-down, which gave me really early exposures. I used the old Trash 80, if anyone's familiar with that, the old Radio Shack computers. Although it's probably dating myself even just mentioning Radio Shack. But I started off on one of those, and where everything was in DOS and things like that later on. So I've been using computers since I was very, very young.
Wow. So having that computer at such a young age, were you playing games on there? What were you doing on the computer?
The first, of course, there's a lot of like educational games that my parents would have us do, stuff from the Learning Company and things of that nature. But as I got older, I started getting more and more interested in programming. My mom tells me, in kindergarten, we had this thing where you have to fill out, like, what do you want to do for a living? And I put on their computer programmer, having no idea that I was actually going to end up doing that, at some point in my career.
So you're doing some programming. Also going to school. What were was your intentions to do this for a career, go on your own, work for a company? What were your thoughts as a young age?
So I actually got started with the web design stuff when I was in junior high. We're talking 93, 94, when it was really a nascent technology, just starting to get some feet. And, we had a few web browsers that had come out, but most people didn't really use it too much. It was kind of like a novelty thing. And let's see.
You're fine.
This is what happens when you work from home, right?
Exactly.
Anyhow, so it was very, very early on, but people were starting to say, hey, I'd like to have a website for my organization and things of that nature. And so being interested in that technology, being one of the few people that could do it back then I was like, well, hey, I can make some money doing this. So here I was at 13, 14 years old, started my first business doing web design. And it wasn't anything major, but brought in a few bucks. And initially just doing it for friends and family, my local church, that kind of thing. But I decided to start advertising myself in the only ways that I could as a junior hire. So I started like posting about myself in like bulletin boards and like, hey, I can build a website for you. And you know, the only phone number we had available was our home phone. And so my parents laugh now because they start getting phone calls of people asking for this fictional company I made up. Of course, at that age, I couldn't even file a real DBA or anything. So, I just made up a name that I was going to operate under. And, they'd call up asking for, my company. And my parents would be like, who? What? I was like, oh, that's me. That's me. Here, give me the phone.
So you're making money off it. You're finding enjoyment in it. Do you go to college basically for web design, or what happens next?
Actually, no. So around that time, a movie called Toy Story came out, one of the first like big 3D animated films. And I really fell in love with the idea of 3D animation and the filmmaking process. So I actually took a lot of the money that I was earning like in the summer, doing technology work, and put it towards buying equipment, buying software to learn 3D animation. Went to school for film and video production, wanting to go into that with the idea of working for Pixar or someone like that. And God had other plans for me, I guess, because after the first year of film school, then that's when the .com bubble burst. And at the same time, living in the Detroit area, we had the bottom drop out of the auto industry. And so I came back from my first year of college. Literally, I could not get a job at McDonald's because they were on a hiring freeze. It was that bad as far as our economy. And so I was like, okay, well, I got to do something to pay off my student loan. My parents were not the type to kind of coddle me. And so they're like, well, if you're not going to school, you're going to pay rent. And so, pay these bills, and kind of fell back on my hobby business of doing the web design. And it just kind of took off from there.
So you're doing web design. I'm guessing by this time you actually filed a real fictitious name, not just
actually at that time it was just operating under my own name as a freelancer.
Okay. And then what happens next? So you're doing better at this, the web design. What happens next?
Went to work for a number of other agencies and companies, some of the biggest in the world, different ad agencies and things of that nature. Worked on a lot of large accounts, got a lot more experience. And then eventually I was working on a project for a large telecom, and my primary area of focus was a technology called Flash. If any of your listeners are familiar with it, it was a big technology for doing web animation and video, pretty much the primary technology for that for a couple decades. And I've been doing it since it was in its beta form, before it was even called Flash. So I was one of the most, one of the guys that have been using it the longest out there. Had built up a really good reputation. And then there was a letter that got put out by Steve Jobs, basically completely bashing Flash, saying, hey, this is never going to come out on the iPhone or iPad or any of our devices. We're not going to allow it. And I went from getting 3-4 calls from headhunters every week to not be able to find work anywhere. And that letter kind of coincided with when I gotten laid off from that job. And so fortunately, I did have a little bit of severance that came with that, but that doesn't last very long. And I went 9 months being unemployed. At which point I was starting to get a little desperate. I was like, look, I'm trying to find work. My primary technology I've been focusing on, spent 16 years building and expertise in, has basically gone away overnight. And I'm having trouble getting work. So if I can't find work for somebody else, I'm just going to do it on my own. And so that's when I took that last little bit of severance that I had left, filed the paperwork to get an LLC going, and just went full hog, on self-employment. And, really things couldn't have been better. That first year we did all, this was in July that I filed the paperwork. Between July to the end of the year, we did almost 100,000 in revenue first year right off the bat. And then we were doubling it year after year for about 5 or 6 years there. just growing tremendously. So by 2017, 2018, I had almost 70 people working for me on multiple projects, and things were going very, very well.
Well, let's talk about that growth. Okay, so you're building your company. I mean, there's a difference between being an employee and being a
Mhm.
boss, right? And leading people, right? So, what was that transition like of actually hiring on people and then managing people?
It was definitely a learning experience. Um, but I think the approach that I took, and I never went through any like management training or anything like that. It was all basically like, what, how do I want to be treated? What did I appreciate about managers that I've had? What did I not appreciate about managers I've had? And then applying that to how I treated people working for me. Uh, my management style, I guess, was very much that of a teammate. So really, it was, I'm kind of steering the ship here because I own the company, but at the same time, I'm right there in the mud with you guys. So I'd be like the architect or the account manager role, where I was driving the project, talking to the clients, communicating that with my teammates and everything. But at the end of the day, I was sitting right there working right alongside them. It wasn't anything of, okay, I'm just going to toss this over the fence to you and expect you to get it done. We were side by side, and and the people who were working for me really, really appreciated that, because they knew, one, that I wasn't making promises that we couldn't deliver on, because I was part of the delivery, process. I wasn't gonna, put it on them and throw them under the bus. But also, they knew that um, if they had issues that came up, things that were blockers, or things that they couldn't figure out, that they could come talk to me and I could speak their language. I wasn't just some manager that didn't really know what the day to day looked like.
Now, were there things that you had to work through? I mean, because you're making it sound that it was very smooth process of, okay, bring it on one person, then bring on the next person. I mean, was it that smooth that you're kind of describing it, of getting from no one to 70 people?
Yeah, it wasn't quite that smooth. But I mean, I guess one of the things that I had taken from one of the agencies I'd worked at is they had this model where they had a pool of freelancers that they called the studio. And so they had different like project managers for each project, for each client. And the studio was kind of like a shared pool of resources that they could pull from for wherever they needed. And I saw that model and thought it really worked well. And I kind of applied to my business. So I had people who would manage projects, and then I had a pool that they could each pull from. And that helped for scalability. But with those managers, though, the project managers, the biggest thing I had to overcome was being willing to delegate. Um, when you start off on your own, I was working 80, 90-hour weeks. I joke I had a burning the candle at both ends of the torch in the middle, right? Um, and I actually was working so hard. I put myself in the hospital because I was just completely exhausted, and started having blackouts and things of that nature. And it wasn't a good position. It took me getting to that point to be willing to hire that first person, because I was wanting to try and do everything myself. And when you start growing, you need to learn to start trusting other people and being willing to delegate. And so that was a big hurdle for me to get over. But it's like once I made that leap and said, okay, I'm going to trust you, because if I don't, I'm going to put myself in a bad position. Um, Unfortunately, having a good work ethic and being a hard worker isn't always the best thing. So you need to also work smart and be willing to delegate.
I mean, let's talk about that, the blacking out. I mean, before you
Yeah.
actually hired someone. I mean, at that time, did you have anyone in your corner? I know you talked about it sounded like when you were younger, your parents were big supporters of yourself. I mean, did you have anyone in your corner when you were blacking out that kind of helped you, kind of gave you that push to start delegating and hiring?
Probably my wife would be the biggest person that was, really kind of proponent behind that. You know, excuse me. Um, my wife is actually an RN. She's a nurse,
Okay.
and so she has a lot of experience with that. And so when I started having those episodes, like I'd be driving home and like all of a sudden forget where I was, this like type of thing. And these are like paths that I was driving every single day.
Hmm.
Um, we did had all kinds of tests done, everything, trying to figure out what was going on. And at the end of the day, I just said, you're pushing your body too hard. Your body is not meant to just keep going, going, going all the time. You need to be able to take a break. And I was like, well, I'm trying to get this business going. I don't have time to take a break. And so my wife was just like, you know what, you got to get someone to help you. You got to hire someone else to help you. It's like, but man, that is hard. Like giving up some control of your business. It's kind of like handing your baby over to a stranger, right?
Hmm.
In a lot of ways, it's being able to trust somebody to care for your business the way you would care for it. Kind of making that mental leap. Like I said, crossing that threshold. It took me probably more than it should have to get me to the point where I was willing to do that. But once I did, man, we just exploded as far as growth. And a lot of it was all based on reputation, where everything was word of mouth. We weren't having to do any advertising for ourselves because we had so much coming in. Like I said, we were doubling our revenue year after year without even having to do any kind of marketing or advertising. It was just based on word of mouth between clients saying, "Oh, hey, Nick and his guys, they can do this. They did a really good job for us." And so clients were coming in, and the money was coming in, and everything was going really well. But it took a lot of it was a hard road to get there. It was probably a year and a half of me working, 2, 3 all-nighters a week, just trying to stay on top of everything, just trying to do the development work, trying to service and provide work for provide good work for your customers. But then at the same time, there's the business aspects of having to, do the pay, do the billing and all that kind of stuff that you really have to keep on top of. And a lot of times, it'll all get put on the back burner until I had to deal with it. And then you're, like I said, you're up in the wee hours trying to do that. And I think just about every entrepreneur out there can probably relate to that.
How do you make sure as you're growing that the same pride that you took into each of your clients' work is felt by your employees when they take on one of your clients' jobs?
Probably I'm just very careful about who I put in those positions. Um, it takes a lot of vetting to make sure it's someone that I can trust. But essentially, with anybody that I put in that kind of like project management or account management position, I'm making sure that basically, they are equipped with everything that they need. That even if something were to happen to me and I dropped off the planet, that they could keep operating the business without me. And it's basically, trying to kind of clone myself, if you will. Um, not necessarily in personality and all that, but just in the pride for the work. And one of the core things that I try to instill in people who are working for me, and that I try to follow myself, is that always, to the best of my ability, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do when I say I'm going to do it. It really comes down to integrity, right? And these are the things that you can't teach. These are the things, to employees. These are the things you can't. Um, you can try to cultivate them, trying to encourage them, but at the end of the day, if they don't have that kind of core value of integrity there, then I just you got to cut them loose and make sure that only people working for you, uh, the only people working for you are ones that have that integrity, that have that value system. And I think that has served us well.
Where do you, I mean, you've grown so much over the years. Where do you see yourself and your company going in the next 5 years?
Well, one of the big changes that we made with the pandemic was up until then, our bread and butter was servicing just enterprise, large scale companies, the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, because my mindset in starting the business was, hey, that's where the money's at, right? These are the ones that can write the big checks. But what you see with those companies is um, there's a lot of red tape in getting that work. A lot of times you're talking about 6 to 9 month sales cycles to sell those projects, because you're not just dealing with one person. You're having to get approval from a director and then a VP and then sometimes other C levels in order to be able to get a project signed off on. And so it's a very long, arduous process that may or may not even come to fruition. Um, so while there's a lot of money there, there's a lot of work on the back end that has to happen to get there. And as we saw with things going on with the pandemic, we saw a lot of small, medium-sized businesses really struggling to be able to operate because they didn't necessarily have websites that could sell their products. They were having their storefronts shut down where they couldn't operate as they've been used to, with the brick and mortar shops face to face. Everything changed, right? And I was like, you know what, we can help these people. We've got all this experience that we've built up working with huge companies. But we can take what we've learned from them, what works and what doesn't work, and then apply that to these smaller businesses. Basically take these things that typically only enterprise class customers can access in terms of skills and workers, and make it accessible to the SMBs. And so that was a kind of a pivot that we made that's really started serving us well, where our customers are able to get access to people with that level of experience as far as the advertising, marketing, software development, web design. It's not just okay, hey, this guy's selling websites for $500, and he's just going to go buy some pre-made WordPress template for $50 off the the internet, and then slap your logo on it and say, here's your website. That's not the kind of stuff we do. We tailor everything to our customers' needs. So we start off with what we call the initial fitting, where we kind of interview the customer, learn about them, learn about how they operate their business, how they want to communicate and interact with their customers. And then we tailor the website, we tailor their communication strategies, we tailor their marketing strategies all around that. One of the things I saw working with a lot of these big companies, either internally or as a consultant, was a lot of times they do things completely backwards. You might get someone that goes and buys like a really expensive software package, like a Siebel or something along those lines, or SAP, and then they come to their IT people or these other other departments in the company and say, hey, we just bought this $10 million software package, figure out how we could use it, right? And I just kept shaking my head going, why are we doing things this way? And that was like one of the really big motivators around how we do our businesses. We're going to start with the customer and their needs first, and then we'll build the technology package around that. So we're very technology agnostic. If you like Apple, if you like Android, if you, whatever, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, to us, it doesn't matter. It's about, okay, what is the right tool to serve your customers? And then we'll help you use those to be able to do that.
Well, what's your process then, or how do you teach your process? Because as you're talking about, you have people out there, digital marketers, that sometimes specialize in a certain platform, saying, hey, you know what? People are going to come on to me and I'm going to do Facebook ads for them, or I'm going to do Instagram ads for them. I'm going to do whatever kind of ads for them. For you, you're focusing more on the client. So you're not necessarily specializing on a certain technology, and technology changes at such a rapid rate. So when you figure out, okay, this client needs these different avenues, these different social media platforms, whatever it might be, how do you gain enough knowledge to help your clients compete with those other ones that might be specialized in it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the way we kind of do it is at the top level. Like, for myself, I have a good generalized knowledge of all the platforms, as do my project managers. So they know, okay, Facebook is good for this, LinkedIn is good for that, YouTube is good for that. So they can provide generalized guidance. But then once we determine, okay, what path is right for you, then we've got specialists in each of those areas that know all the nitty gritty nuts and bolts. And they're the ones that are in charge of implementation.
Makes sense. And I appreciate you, Nick, for being here today.
Mhm.
On this roadmap of getting to where you're at right now, where do you see the biggest headache hurdle that you've kind of gone through? I mean, over the years to get to this point.
I think probably the biggest headache for me was, like I said, the being willing to delegate. So like I mentioned, when I started doing hiring, when I first started hiring people, that was tough. But I was still right there alongside them. So, we were still working together. And so I was still kind of, really steering the ship. I was still in control. The next step was being willing to actually go on vacation and not be, constantly monitoring project statuses, basically getting my people to the point where I could go to, take the family to Disney World, or we could go to the beach, and I could actually disconnect for that period of time, recharge and relax, and not have to think about it because I knew I could trust them to handle things while I was out. So, these are like the stages that I went through in establishing, getting people that are quality people that you can trust. Building a team like that is probably one of the most difficult things you'll do as an entrepreneur, but also one of the most rewarding if you do it right. If you achieve having that team that you can hand things off to them and know things are going to get done the way that you want them done, the way that's going to serve your customers the best, whether you're involved or not, that's worth its weight in gold.
It's a powerful thing. I mean, when you get to that point when you can walk away from the business and it maybe does a little bit better because you're not micromanaging, it's a powerful thing. If someone's listening right now and they're looking for some digital marketing assistance or just trying to find more information about you, what's the best way of them getting more information?
The best thing to do would be to visit our website, sartorisdigital.com. That's SARTORIS digital.com. And from there, you can see, the different services we provide. But more importantly, you can find a way to contact us where we have just a short little form just to get some basic information that we would need. But then there's a link out there to be able to set up a meeting. And there's no cost at all to that consultation. But, we can get to know you a little better. You can get to know us, and we can help you, at least point you in the right direction of where you need to go, even if it's not working with us. And I'd say probably half the calls I take, I'm not selling anything. I'm just giving advice and saying, look, what you need is not what we do, but here is someone that can help you, or here's a good book if you want to read that and do it yourself. For example, not everyone needs digital marketing. Sometimes people need more grassroots marketing, right? Depending on the type of business that they have, that's not a service that we provide. And so I'm going to tell them, look, this is the right path for you. Even if I could potentially sell them, I would rather them do what's actually going to help their business succeed. And then maybe later when they started growing, maybe that they need digital marketing. But, I would rather only serve the people that I can help and that is going to be a good fit, rather than forcing a sale and taking someone's money when I can't really help them.
Is there a book or a platform that would probably be good for people that maybe aren't at the level to bring on your services, but are just kind of curious about digital marketing? Maybe they're a small startup or just a individual looking just kind of pick on little nuggets.
Well, there's so many good books out there. I got a whole shelf full over there of stuff from everyone from Napoleon Hill to Zig Ziglar, Russell Brunson. There's no shortage of information out there. the one piece of advice I would give people is, try to avoid the shiny object syndrome of, running from one info product to another, to another, to another. You could literally spend yourself into the poorhouse on info products and not get anywhere. So, I think just look at things that are just general, all around, just good marketing advice. Things like Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, or Zig Ziglar's Over the Top. These are about, how do you handle relationships with clients? How do you, how do you approach those sales relationships? And how do you think about sales? Is sales something that kind of gives you the creeps because you think of the used car salesman or someone who's trying to trick somebody into buying something from you? Or is it about the relationship where you're trying to help them, right? So, those things that focus on your mindset about how you think about sales and marketing are probably going to be the things that are going to give them the biggest advantage. Because if their mind is right on it, then a lot of the rest of it works itself out.
Well, again, thank you, Nick, for being here. Hopefully everyone listening, got some great nuggets right there. And I think that's for any kind of business. It's having, I think, a general knowledge of the process of whatever it might be that you're selling, yet focusing on the clients. The clients are key. Focus on them. And then from there, then you can dive deeper into the needs. Just like you go to a restaurant, they're focusing on you. And then even if you're new to whatever that business you are, you can go, hey, trust me, I'll get you to wherever you want to get to. Thank you again, Nick, for being here. Everyone, please subscribe, please share, and go find Nick. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.